Sex can be the fountain of youth if you do it the right way. It's really been right there in front of you the whole time. You just went a little bit too far. Went a little bit over the edge and ejaculated and lost potential benefits you could have gotten from sex without ejaculating. And there is actually a scientific study that strongly supports what I'm saying about this. So I'm gonna share that with you in this video, and I'm also gonna share my own experiences of having had a lot of non-ejaculatory sex in the past 10 years of my life and what the benefits I've experienced and many other people have experienced from having sex in this, we could say, unconventional way. If you're enjoying the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel and make sure you get my free ejaculation control course through the link in the video description below. So first of all, there's a scientific study that was done quite a while ago. I think it was in the 80s or something like that. Basically, these scientists took a group of worms called nematodes. These are worms that are very sexually prolific. They like to have a lot of sex. That's my kind of worm. And they split them into 3 different groups. The first group, they allowed to have sex as normal. They allowed the worms to have all the sex they want. These are the average Joe Blow men type of worms. The second group of worms, they prevented from having any sex. These were sexually abstinent worms. These were the monk worms, the celibate worms. Not my flavor. The third group of worms, they genetically altered so that they could no longer produce sperm, but they allowed them to have all the sex that they want. These were the sexual kung fu worms, we'll say. And what they found was that these 3 different groups of worms had very different lifespans. The first group of worms, having all the sex they wanted, just ejaculating, just going on an ejaculation frenzy, they lived for about 8 days. Second group of worms were celibate. No sex, no ejaculation. They lived for 11 days. The third group of worms, genetically altered, all the sex that they want, but technically no ejaculation, no sperm production. They lived 14 days. They lived the longest. So this is a fascinating study with some very interesting implications. First of all, it shows that the act of constantly needing to create more sperm because of constant ejaculation potentially shortens a man's life. Now, of course, that's if we translate what happens in a worm to a human body, but I think it's very relevant here. It takes a lot of resources for the body to create sperm, a lot more than mainstream medical doctors will admit to. So refraining from excessive ejaculation is very beneficial, and not having to create more sperm made these worms last longer. However, the thing I find the most interesting about the study was that beyond celibacy, beyond abstinence from sex, what was even more beneficial for longevity was having an abundance of sex without needing to create more sperm. And I would translate this to my own practice of non-ejaculatory sex, primarily not ejaculating during sex. Fortunately, unlike these worms, I was not genetically altered to be unable to make sperm. I am not shooting blanks, baby, but I don't shoot very often. In fact, I rarely shoot. So when a man transitions into a primarily non-ejaculatory experience of sex, meaning that he is not ejaculating during sex, this has profound implications for his health. And this may sound strange if you're new to this concept, but actually profound implications to your enjoyment of sex. You enjoy sex more when you're not ejaculating all the time, and you can actually experience more sexual pleasure. I've been doing this for 10 years. I've been having non-ejaculatory sex for 10 years of my life. And it's not saying I've never ejaculated in that 10 years. I do occasionally ejaculate, but not very often. And the paradigm shift here for men is to transition from this ejaculation-centric experience of an explosive peak orgasm that's very short-lived and then over and you have to recover, into the non-ejaculatory orgasm experience. Yes, you can have non-ejaculatory orgasms, because the first thing when men hear something like this is like, okay, that's great, but like, fuck that. If I have to give up sexual pleasure to live longer, I'd rather live a shorter life. And to be honest, that's how I feel as well. I would rather live a shorter life than have a longer life devoid of sexual pleasure. But fortunately, that is not the case. From my experience, is much more pleasure in having sex without ejaculation, because I've talked about this a lot in other videos, so I don't want to like repeat myself too much. But to sum it up, what happens when you transition to this non-ejaculatory state of sexual pleasure? When you learn to have these non-ejaculatory orgasms, essentially the whole act of sex becomes incredibly orgasmic. Instead of being goal-oriented, just rushing into this one point of a very short 5 to 10 second explosive orgasm, you allow yourself to be more embodied and more present with sensations that are happening throughout sex. And the path of being able to do this, of being able to have full body non-ejaculatory orgasms, is to open up the nervous system, to release physical tension so that the whole body essentially becomes a sexual organ, so that pleasure moves through your whole body instead of only being limited to your genitals. So this brings much more satisfaction through sex, because an ejaculation is a discharge of your life force. And so yeah, it's a release of stress and tension, because most men don't have other ways to release stress and tension. But you're essentially emptying your bank account, your life force, your vital substances of your body to get this release of stress and tension. So it's not a very holistic way of doing it. So My wife and I, we've been having non-ejaculatory sex our whole relationship together, 7 years of this. And almost every time we have sex together, it's part of our practice, because understanding the implications of this, we're both practicing this sexual cultivation path, this tantric path. So it's beyond just romantic fiery passion. That's a huge part of it, but it's also simply a cultivation practice, a partner yoga, we could say, a daily exercise to exercise our endocrine system, cultivate immense pleasure, love and connection, and recharge the body, the mind, and the spirit. And whenever we finish having sex, my wife always tells me, "You look younger. You look 10 years younger." And I notice her face looks younger. There's more glow. There's more youthfulness. Sex literally makes you younger. Now, if you look at someone who jerks off to porn every day, who sits at home on Pornhub just, jerking off into a tissue, they usually don't look young. They usually look very dried out, dark circles under the eyes. They don't look healthy. And there's a lot of people who are having sex every single day, but they're ejaculating, 1, 2, 3, even 4 times a day. And the same thing, they look dried up. They look extremely depleted. So the determining factor here is volume of sex, and also relative to that volume of sex, a low frequency of ejaculation, primarily not ejaculating during the sex that you have for men. And this will give you incredible benefits that having sex has for your system. There's a release of hormones. There's a release of beneficial neurotransmitter chemicals. But when you ejaculate every time, those hormone and neurotransmitter levels drop off, and you feel like shit. You get the release of prolactin, you lose a lot of zinc, a lot of essential minerals, and you feel depressed and lethargic. Now, to contrast that, when you have sex for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever, and then you don't ejaculate at the end, you maintain that charge of heightened pleasure, arousal, and that juiciness. We all know what that feels like. When you're close to ejaculating, but you're not ejaculating, you are at the peak of sensation, experience, and arousal, and just aliveness. When you maintain that and store that energy in your body, you store it in your nervous system, you feel turned on for the rest of the day, for the rest of the week, and you live your life in this creative state, in this hormonally optimized, healthy, juicy, vibrant vitality. One of the signals that causes your body to age, I would say it's often one of two things. Number one, you stop having sex. You stop feeling aroused. You stop exercising. It's a use it or lose it situation. The body says, okay, I guess we passed breeding age. We're not using this equipment anymore. It's time to shut it down, lower testosterone for the man, and start that declining path towards old age. He's not using it anymore. And the other signal is that of overuse. Excessive ejaculation, because the implications of this scientific study show that it's costing you something to ejaculate, definitely to ejaculate frequently. And so what happens for most men is they're ejaculating so much because they feel like in their teenage years they have unlimited resources, because they have all these hormones, all this vitality. And so it feels okay to ejaculate every day. It's like, well, nothing bad's happening. But then what happens once you hit 30, once you hit 35, 40, for a lot of men now, even hitting 20, all of a sudden they don't get as hard as they used to. Their libido's dropping, no more morning wood. The body's starting to deplete itself because your expenditure of resources is more than you are able to reinvest, we could say. And what happens is, much like when you are nutritionally deficient, when you're eating a diet, if you have a poor diet where you're simply not getting the essential nutrients and minerals that you need, the body starts to pull things from the hair, from the spinal fluid, from the organs. You become pretty depleted. This is what happens to men who are over ejaculating. They're pulling all these resources from the body because they're not taking in as much as they're putting out, and you dry up. So the simple thing here is don't ejaculate so much. Learn to have more sex and ejaculate less. Pleasure increases, hormones increase, and depletion decreases. Seems like an obvious solution. But the trouble is that as men, we've been conditioned through porn to be so addicted to that ejaculatory release. It becomes all men care about is just getting that ejaculation. And when you can shift that paradigm, when you can shift the paradigm into simply enjoying sex, simply enjoying sexual pleasure without a need to ejaculate every single time, you learn to sustain states of full body pleasure, circulate that sexual energy, that arousal, that orgasm through your whole body, and hold on to it. That's it. You're ahead of the game. You're ahead of the game, son, and you are going to age very gracefully. And this was strongly understood in ancient times. In ancient China, there's a whole branch of a medical system known as medical sexology. The Taoists of ancient China developed a lot of these sexual practices, the sexual cultivation systems. And what would happen is you go to a doctor, your medical sexologist, and you'd say, okay, you have a kidney condition. I want you to go home, have sex with your partner 3 times a day for 15 minutes each. Do not ejaculate, use this certain sexual position, and you should be fine in 2 weeks. Like literally medical treatment is what sex was used as. And the important thing here was that the man did not ejaculate, because during sex, you're generating tremendous amounts of energy. We all feel it. You felt what it feels like to be highly aroused, to be highly sexually charged. And a lot of men interpret that as a discomfort because we've been programmed to keep it stuffed away just in our genitals, only be expressed there, to something we only do in private. And so there's all this neurosis around sexuality. There's all this suppression and shame around it. And when you learn to reconnect, this beautiful thing that your sexual energy and your sexuality is, when you learn to holistically reconnect that to your entire being as a human, it no longer becomes this impulsive way of just getting your rocks off. It becomes a beautiful part of your life. And I'm not saying that, we should all be freely expressing ourselves sexually in public. That's not what I'm saying here. But just that understand that we came into sexuality with a lot of misinformation, with a lot of wounding. And it's time to relearn what it is to be a human, what it truly means to be a sexual being, and what is the most beneficial, harmonious, balanced, and healthy way to engage in sex. Looking back in times in my life, when I was around 19, 20, 21, I was having a lot of sex, but I was ejaculating every time, and I didn't feel that great. I was depressed. I had anxiety. I had substance abuse. I was addicted to things. I was very unhealthy. Even though I was younger, I was depleted and dried up. And now I'm 35, I have a lot of sex without ejaculating, and I feel fantastic. I really believe that sex is an internal technology that is designed to heal us, designed to bring us energy, creativity, harmony, connection, intimacy, joy, pleasure, good health, vitality. But it's been hijacked by certain forces, we could say, the porn industry, the mass controllers of the world we live in, to literally become a way to castrate humans. They've got us by the balls, but guess what? When you take back your sexual creative power, there's no stopping you. You can live whatever life you want to live, and you can maintain your vitality, your creativity, your clarity of mind, your clarity of spirit well into old age. So just to sum up, sex without ejaculation is the fountain of youth. Frequent ejaculation is the path to aging, accelerated depletion. What do you choose? Definitely check out my playlist on non-ejaculatory orgasms because that's an essential part of transitioning into non-ejaculatory sex. And I'll put a link in the description of this video of a very comprehensive video I did about non-ejaculatory orgasms, misconceptions about it. And of course, if you're interested in what I'm talking about here, I go into great depth in training to rewire your body, your mind to experience this state of non-ejaculatory sexual bliss, overcome premature ejaculation, have complete ejaculation control in my sexual kung fu programs. A really good starting point for beginners is my male sexual mastery course. And to get a little more advanced, my multi-orgasmic man and sex god courses are the path to absolute sexual mastery. So check that out. Let me know in the comments if there's anything you've been struggling with about non-ejaculatory sex or questions you have. Any aspects of this you'd like to hear me talk more about, I'd be happy to do that. Let me know in the comments. Please give this video a like. Make sure you subscribe to support the channel. Thanks for watching. Take care, my friends.